Good afternoon. Am I audible back there? Yeah. And the topic is also a little intense, but very, very interesting. I've got very, very good panelists here. So let me just start off. Let me just set the ball rolling. I want you to just picture yourself sitting at a wedding. Okay, all of us are in a wedding. Let's talk about family investments. This is not family office investments. This is family investments. Think of this whole situation as a wedding. और जब शादी होती है तो किधर ना किधर आपके पास ऐसे 2 या 3 या 4 अंकल आंटी फोई मामा चाचा होते हैं जो 4 5 10 12 शादियां देख के आ चुके होते हैं और वो कमेंट करने के लिए होते हैं. सब आके उसको पूछते हैं फोई आ बराबर छे कि नहीं, मामा बराबर छे कि नहीं, तो आके बोले हाँ हाँ एवरीथिंग इज ओके, नहीं ये बराबर नहीं है. सो माई ट्रीट माई फेलो पैनलिस्ट as that panel which is going to comment on what is going to happen in the wedding. Okay? So what we're looking at today, if you see, is that family offices have been passing down wealth through generations. And more often than not, it is the patriarch or the matriarch. वो एक सीनियर सिटीजन अंकल होएगा 70-80 साल का, उसको जाके सब बोलते हैं अंकल हम लोग प्रॉपर्टी में डाले क्या, बोले तो जाके फिर प्रॉपर्टी में डालते हैं. सो इट्स वेरी वेरी इंडिविजुअल ओरिएंटेड. इट्स ऑलमोस्ट लाइक अ फैमिली व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप, राइट? बट व्हाट इज नाउ हैपनिंग इज प्लेटफॉर्म्स लाइक गिफ्ट सिटी are increasingly encouraging these families and these patriarchs to actually put a lot of structure, moving from families to family offices. And I think this is exactly what we're trying to talk about here. So let me just start off. Let me just start the ball rolling, and I'll start off with the lady here. But just to give you context, what we're trying to now talk in the first round is from families to family offices, and how families can move from that informal, unstructured sort of investing style to a more formal, structured, ring-fence structure. So, Prerna, if families were to move, I'm just starting off straight with you, and this is a very simple but a very direct question and yet a little profound. If families were to move from tactical investing like what I just mentioned to more institutional style investing, what would be your insights in terms of what they need to do, and how can GIFT as a platform help to that?
Certainly. Thank you so much, Vikas. A very good afternoon, everybody. We'll try not to make you sleep after the brilliant lunch that PMS had for us. So initially, let's start with what is institutional investing. What is it that institutions do that, what families are not doing? Primarily, there's a lot of alternative investing that would be happening. So, for example, if we talk about Canadian pension funds, right? Everybody in India knows Canada se bahut paisa India mein aaya hai. So, what are these guys doing here? They are doing private markets. They're doing alternative investments. They'd go beyond real estate. They'd go beyond public equities. They'd go beyond bonds, and they do things like private credit, private equity, VC. In some cases, they go and buy football teams and, music team, whatever. So they do a lot of this stuff. So how do they do this is they have a lot of professional thought process, and there's a lot of professional aspects to managing this money, which is how families sort of then eventually become family offices. Essentially, if I talk about India in particular, how we can potentially do this for families is something as simple as AIFs, right? So anytime you're talking about investing in private markets, you would know some startup aa raha hai, acha startup mein angel investing kar do, but how do you go beyond? How do you sort of structure it? How do you bring in risk return analysis? How do you get professionalism? How do you do monitoring of your investments? One simple thought process is give your money to fund managers, give money to AIFs. A lot of fund managers have come up in India who have a niche in certain sectors, who have a niche in certain asset classes. Apart from just giving them money, what makes it beautiful is, you get an opportunity to co-invest. So if you have a sector of preference, you have an asset class of preference, go ahead and co-invest. And as families, you're coming in as an LP to these fund managers, you have the right to actually negotiate and get in co-investment rights wherever you like. If you prefer multiple ventures, go in for a fund of fund, go in for a system wherein you go beyond just private equity, you do a bit of venture, a bit of private equity, explore something of that sort. And I also feel, something that GIFT has done beautifully is come up with something called FIF, the Family Investment Fund Platform. I think that is such a beautiful structure, because now what you can do, it literally forces you to go in from a family to a family office structure, because you're doing your estate planning, you're doing multi-generational wealth planning, you get a chance to take money outside of India way beyond the normal LRS scheme. And all of that can only happen if you bring yourself into the FIF structure, which I feel is something that Gift City has gifted to a lot of our families in India. And once your families go into that scope and look at AIFs in combination, they would eventually be thinking like institutional investors and playing like them, because eventually it's not about the 70-year-old gentleman who has seen life, who's actually done some great work to bring you here. But when you're looking at quantum leaping from here and you're looking at actually compounding capital, uh, this is probably the way to go.
So maybe somebody would give the family office patriarch the advice, समय के साथ बदलिए दादाजी. Family से family investment fund, right? I got that right. And maybe as we go along, if you guys could also throw some insights into that. But we should specifically for you, I think even today when we talk to family offices, even if they're structured family offices, when we talk about equity, there's a lot of discussion around stocks we own. Okay, ये मेरा portfolio है, ये मेरा holding है, ये मेरा stock है. Nobody talks about a structured portfolio creation. And I think from that point of view, long short is a pretty strong avenue to build portfolio construction. So how can long short strategies help families move from just stock selection to portfolio construction? If you could throw some light on that.
So you said it very right. I think as the rule number one in investing is diversification. You go to any Bridgewater, to Chameleon, to any large hedge fund, I think the number one rule is diversification. When you say equity only or long only, you're talking about perpetual bull market. Now, there is a study, decadal study done by Goldman Sachs that comes out every end of the decade. 2000 to 2020, in 20 years, global equity returns were 3.5%, debt returns were 3.4%, long short funds were 14.4%. So when you look at longer duration, now I do understand since COVID, it's been one-sided bull market. So everybody do believe that wealth can only be created by certain asset class and this can happen. But so I think as a family office, global long short provides you that diversification, provides you that beta when things are bad or when things are flat. I mean, in India's case, we've seen 2007 to 2012 Nifty given zero returns, 2015 to 2020, 5 years, zero returns. Even this calendar year, I think Indian long short fund, if you look at it, Nifty is 3% up, they are about 8.5% up. So that alpha creation for family offices as well as individual investor becomes very important. Now, what's really Gift Cities created is given a global platform. So actually, we are actually fighting against headwind. Most of the people already had apprehensions about long short fund because they think it means it's a trading or it means it's a gambling or whatever it's called. Global long short provides you literally across the globe, every asset class, every equity, every real estate, everything on a play. And it's primarily driven by algorithms. It's primarily driven by quants, right? Now, if you go by Hong Kong, Singapore, Dubai, New York, London, the hedge fund industry, you're talking about $5 to $6 trillion industry, which is the total market cap of India. Today, the total alternate assets in India is about 350, 400 billion. So what I can tell you is that we do see next 10 years as a family office and individual investor looking to diversify globally into long, short and alternate asset classes.
Interesting. We're talking about FIF, we're talking about long, short, some very interesting concepts, and I'm just putting myself in that patriarch shoes and saying I need to know more. But what a patriarch definitely knows, Bhavin, is equity. Okay, you are one of India's most successful equity fund managers, and you've built a stellar track record at this point of time. I believe when we talk to, if I were in a position to recommend your fund, or if you were talking to a family, local equity exposure comes very naturally. They would either know the stock or know the advisor, or in some cases even the promoter of the company which stock you're talking about, correct? But the same is not the case when it comes to global equity allocation. There is a little bit of reticence which happens, If you could just throw some light in terms of, why this is happening, do they need a globally diversified portfolio, and how can GIFT help in that particular perspective?
So I think I saw there was a morning session, even Hiren did a keynote and he showed one slide. And that's that's a data that I talk a lot about. I did a study back in 1996, so almost 30 years back, along with Michael Mauboussin, he's a famous writer on markets, on different equity markets around the world, different countries, and which countries had a good set of companies delivering superior return on capital, and which markets actually understood the importance of that. Interestingly enough, India stood out along with United States in 1996. Now, if you look at the data over the last 30 years, Indian market is the best performing equity market in the world in US dollar terms. So that is the biggest hurdle that one faces when trying to convince somebody to invest outside India. And so then, why do I have to invest outside India? Indian market is giving me such fantastic returns. So that is, I think, one factor. But having said that, I think there needs to be, and wherever I have had some success, because we also have strategy to invest outside India, is to walk somebody through the basic concept of diversification, widening one's investment frontier, increasing the return potential while reducing the risk, and the fact that India ultimately is still a small part of overall global market cap, and why this is important from an overall portfolio perspective, especially given the geopolitical situation that India faces with hostile neighbors on both sides, although we are having a nice warming up with China. So that I think, and I think once you do that, I think there is definitely some bit of interest in that. I think some also depends on individual situation of each families. Some families have their next generation living abroad and they are more open to such ideas. Whereas, if somebody doesn't have any of that, then it takes time. But as I said, yes, it is still a lot of work to do, especially given how good Indian market is. As far as GIFT, I think GIFT is a great platform to offer such services. And in fact, that's why we are able to do that. And I think there are still a lot of things that need to happen here to have a big thriving global investing for families activity happening here, and we can go into that in detail. But I think at a starting point, yes, the construct does exist. In fact, we are launching a gift fund to invest abroad. We have been running it under PMS, but because of the estate duty issue in the US, a fund structure works better for investors, and so that's something that we think it's only possible because of GIFT. So yes, GIFT is an enabler in that way.
Wonderful answer. It reminds me of this conversation I was having with the family office, and before I could start talking about investments, they actually put me in the midst of a family conversation, which was that हमारी लड़की गई थी overseas पढ़ने, वहाँ Mexican लड़के से प्यार हो गया उसको. Okay, so this is global allocation at the that is on a lighter note. But once when a wedding gets going, I think people start talking about the food. ये starter बराबर नहीं है, ये dessert में counter दूर खड़ा किया है, and why did we not have separate Jain food counters? It always happens, right? I mean, there are always people talking about it, more often than not. So, effectively, families also need more than equities and real estate, which they've traditionally been there. Again, I'm talking about families, not family offices. Family offices have moved way beyond that. So I just want to dig in a little bit more to find out, sort of a wider buffet of options which GIFT City can give you. So Vishnu, I'd just like to start with you. You talked about long short, and I'll request you to share that Goldman Sachs study with pmsbazaar. I think we can all learn a lot from that. But having understood a bit of long short and learned a bit of long short, most people, find it very intimidating because there's a word short in that. They find it very intimidating. I mean, Bhavin just mentioned about the fact that this has been the longest running bull market. So short kaisa karne ka? And will I lose money? Can you share some real life insights in terms of how these strategies have helped Indian investors and just demystify it a bit? Can you just do that?
Yeah. So again, global long short.
Sorry, just part two to the question before I forget. And how can GIFT City help you? Yeah. Because like we have equities as an asset class, I just want you to think about risk management as an asset class, and just highlight how long short and gift can help. Sorry, please go ahead.
No, I think perfect, and I think that's kind of the question we face with the family offices or large clients all the time. And I think Bhavin Bhai also mentioned very correctly that India's provided great returns. Why do I need to look out or diversify or look at other asset classes? I think this is where the investment has a very short-term memory loss, right? So people forget the whole COVID era. You look at small crashing 60%. If you remember, mid caps crashing 50%. Nifty was down 36%, and every broker in India actually published report that this will be worse than 2008, which was 60% correction at a Nifty level, right? So if you look at that era, the global long short funds, or at least the one that we saw globally, including S&P down, they were up 25% in that same quarter. So global long short actually makes money when there is high beta. So what you need to understand is when the markets are boring, it kind of matches the market. When markets are bull, one-sided, then probably long short looks very boring because it doesn't give you that, because everything's created in a long. But the moment market shows volatility or a down cycle, the long short makes 2x, 3x because your hedges get into the play at a multiple level, right? So, I mean, you can look at multiple global funds who've done phenomenal work. I mean, there are mathematicians who are running in New York, where I worked in the past 10 years. I mean, they've done 30-year, 55% CAGR at a gross level dollar. Show me a single long fund giving you 55% CAGR dollar returns for 30 years. So that's, and again, these are black swans, right? These are not normality. You can't say that every guy is going to eventually deliver it. But I think at a family of, key answer is that it's a, look at it as a kind of negative correlation, look at it as a diversification. Now, in GIFT, we kind of, I think GIFT was a great help. We were the first one to kind of come up and say, we want to set up this global long shot. We have a algorithm from Atlanta-based hedge fund. So we have a partnership with Bridgeway guys. Now, generally, this kind of assets is always taken to Singapore, Hong Kong, or Dubai, or other markets. And I think what tax advantages and corporate structure that GIFT has given, that 50% of your net worth can be invested, is, I think, groundbreaking. That as an asset class.
Can you just repeat that again?
So right now, if you want to, so mutual fund industry had a cap, right? And people, Parag Parikh and a lot of these guys are investing in Google. NASDAQ ETF was there. Now that cap is locked. So people don't have a normal family, when you said, they don't have an option to invest. Number two option is LRS. Now, LRS can happen at individual level, which means you have a limit of $250,000 per citizen per year. If you take travel expenses out, let's say you have a 200,000. Now, what GIFT City is done is that if you invest through corporate entity, so let's say there is a LLP, family LLP, which owns 100 crore, you're allowed to invest 50% of your net worth, which means 50 crore you can put in a gift fund. This is groundbreaking. Before that, you had to go through RBI, you had to go through a lot of stuff. And this, I'm actually talking about with example because our fund is live. We've already got a corporate clients. And this is where corporates are really excited. Because if you look at most of the rich guys in India, 80% of their spending is dollar. The cars you buy, the phones you buy, the vacations you take, kids' education. How can I make all my income in rupee? Why would I not make some percentage of my income in dollars, right? And that's where I think these funds and these categories can fill in.
Interesting. I was also reading somewhere that there is some talk about GIFT allowing an inverse ETF. I think that if it happens, it will probably help a lot. Bhavin, I'm going to now ask you a question which is pretty simple on the face of it, but I want you to, just layer it with some real life examples if you can. We talked about global asset allocation. Most families overlook the fact that true wealth preservation comes from asset allocation. I'm sure they have access to all the studies which you have and which he has and which she has, but they normally overlook that. Over the years, you talked about some study you did in '96. I'm talking about somewhere closer to what we are today. Do you see families attempting to rebalance that equation? If yes, then what are the considerations they have? Is it external stimulus? Is it internal stimulus? If you could give some real life examples, that will be really good for the audience.
I'll start with a funny example. I inherited a portfolio of a family office, which was all equity, and 55% of that portfolio was in one stock. And I asked him why is so much allocation in one stock. He said, I don't really have any reason. Somebody told me to buy these stocks and I bought the stocks. So I said, I can do whatever I want with this portfolio. He said, go ahead. Then it so happened that that stock performed phenomenally well, even after I inherited. I actually sold the entire position because for me, it was too expensive. So every time I go there, you will compare that portfolio, original portfolio, with my portfolio, and despite delivering very good returns, I always look bad. So, it's almost now, 9 years, and I think just now, I think that portfolio has started to perform below, what I'm managing for him. So that's, how much the diversification, asset allocation kind of, I think the way in which and I see family offices, and another situation where I am seeing family offices interested in asset allocation is especially when they have the next generation that comes back with some education, in many cases education abroad, and they are open to such ideas. They are receptive to understanding the purpose, the concept of asset allocation, and they start looking at it. I think the challenge, though, is that at least in the domestic side in India, I think we still have a little bit of void in many of the other sort of alternative assets in terms of options, I would say, and that's why it's still heavily kind of dominated by the the equities, and I think even the bond market, for example, to deploy money in a liquid bond market is not easy. So I think that is the challenge. But yes, I think when there is that the next generation also in the room, there is willingness to listen to asset allocation.
That's a very, very good example. It's almost like this conversation which usually happens that I got a match for you, but you went ahead and you did a love marriage. Okay, see how well this guy is doing. Doesn't matter how what that guy is doing. See how well this guy is doing. Yeah, and on a very separate note, I think it also reminds me of the grief I give my wealth manager. So I could actually hear that. But thank you for bringing that out. Preda, talking about asset allocation, I think one of the things which is a buzzword now is credit and infra. So when you talk to families and to some extent family offices, are these products simple? Are these products accessible for these family offices? And yet, I mean, simple is one thing. Are they sophisticated enough? If tomorrow a global family office wants to allocate in India, that's part one. And second part of this question is, how do you think, or do you think Gift City can give a structural edge to products like these, when family offices want to invest?
Certainly. So if we start with why is it that we are not doing alternatives for now, as in why are families shying away from it? So, typically you talk about investments in something like equity, something like real estate. One, it is tangible, right? Ghar banaya, ghar kharida dikhta hai. Or you're doing something which is very familiar. You're putting in money in known equity shares. As compared to that, whenever you start talking about alternatives, you're talking about private credit, private equity, you're talking about real assets, which is infrastructure. What really happens is, one, there is this perception that they're complex, and the other thought process is that they're very opaque. We don't know what will come back. So before I started my stint at NEO, I was actually with the government of India for 7 years, and one of the debates that we would have very many times with almost every government official is that Indian roads, Indian pipelines, Indian renewable energy is making money for Canadian pensioners. Again, going back to the Canada angle, right? Because our families are not putting money. To give you a small statistics, currently around 13% of Indian family money is going towards alternatives in India. It probably will go up to 20% in the next 3-4 years. The global average is 50%. So that's where the change is, and of course it is because, as Bhavin rightly said, we didn't really have as much of alternatives in India available for families. That has changed. One, you have a lot of fund managers coming in with AIF structures. You have SEBI AIFs in India, which will help you invest in India itself. And you have now funds coming in Gift City, which sort of help you in investing in alternatives outside the country as well. So, when you talk about GIFT in particular, what would happen earlier is a lot of families who even want to invest outside the country were shying away because, you take your money outside the country, you don't know the jurisdiction, you don't know taxation, you have a lot of those thought processes. Now you're in a home ground, you're in a space wherein you're actually putting your money in a gift jurisdiction, in an Indian jurisdiction per se. The ease and the familiarity is more, but you still get to, sort of access global alternatives if at all. Of course, the taxation regime, the simplicity of moving money, the relaxations and the norms around, the amount of remittance you can do and get back is an add-on which really helps. And if I talk about it from the perspective of families who've actually taken their money outside India, so we've seen over a period of time as education or you through LRS or whatever, there's a lot of money that's gone out, or Indians who've settled outside who now want to take exposure to the Indian market. So, if you talk about it globally, a lot of people are worried what would happen in US. They don't want to go to China. Europe's not giving them as much return. They would want to invest in India, but how? One of the thought processes, and I should probably not say this out, but a lot of Indians are worried about tax terrorism in the country, that they would invest in India or wo 10 saal baad inquiry aa jayega. So, they're worried about a lot of that. But GIFT gives you that beautiful structure wherein you don't have to file your taxes in India if you're outside the country. If you're in India, it gives you the exposure to actually go global and capture alternatives across the world. And of course, in India now it's relatively simple with AIFs and structures like InvITs.
I'm glad you talked about the tax terrorism part of it, because it is just segueing into the statement I was going to make, that seldom have I seen a regulator, no, actually that's not the right way to put it. The regulator that gives, the officials that gives are extremely cooperative. They're very, very good listeners, and if I may add, they act very fast. They'll give you a yes or a no very fast, which I think is probably the structural edge which we're talking about here. Thank you for bringing that up. When we're talking about every wedding, as the wedding progresses, अभी next item क्या है, अभी next item क्या है, अभी next item क्या है, कितना time लगेगा, क्या होगा. So everybody talks about the future. Here's the near future. What we're trying to talk about is the distant future. Okay, not so distant future, maybe 5 years. Bhavin, I want to start off with you. We talked about offshore jurisdictions like Singapore and Dubai. Is innovation the key to making GIFT come up the curve in terms of mind share, market share, like Singapore and Dubai? And if yes, what role do you think IFSCA should be playing at a macro level more than what it is doing right now? What do they need to do differently? I mean, that is what my basic question is. And are there any global sort of reference points or benchmarks which can be emulated? So again, sorry, I'm giving you all layered questions, but
Well, I think you already gave a benchmark example of Singapore, which I think has done a phenomenal job of establishing. I think they had a natural advantage to start with of Singapore itself having very large sovereign fund, but I think they went far beyond that, and I think I mean I may not want to use Dubai as an example because there is some bit of negative connotation that Dubai brings. But I think there are places like Singapore. There is and there is Cayman Islands, for example, which is, and then I think, and GIFT City has to be something in between. We want substance. We want to create. We don't want to be Cayman Islands, which is primarily just kind of a storage for assets. Without having real strong substance. I think what you need is a very strong ecosystem to develop here. And there are many aspects of that which I think need to happen, where the regulator as well as the government can play a big role. I think there is a danger of borrowing from the domestic regulation and bringing it here. And I'm really sorry, but that will not really help, because the competition is not the local market. The competition is global centers across the world, and there the thought process approach is extremely different. The focus is on the intent, not on policies and internal. I mean, how firm A follows a set of rules can be very different from firm B, But if both are achieving the required intent of investor protection and doing the right things, in terms of the end outcomes, then they should be allowed to have that freedom. We have a tendency, I think India in general, Indians in general have a tendency to become very prescriptive. And I think that one has to, stay away from that. The other aspect is talent pool. I think, so talent pool, when something new like this comes up, initially has to come from people who are experienced. So how do you attract even some NRIs who are very good at this to come here and set up shop? I don't think that has happened yet, and I think that that needs to be evaluated why that is not happening. And secondly, creating the local talent. I think the GIFT City has been given the structure to bring top global universities, but I don't think that has happened yet. So I think something needs to happen there, so that there are a lot of graduates coming out with a lot of ideas, and the startup ecosystem then takes off, and then more innovation can also happen. And there are other aspects also. Today for any, if you want to structure something for advice, one has to really scramble to find. Maybe you can find a person in India. Sometimes I have to go all the way to US to get a proper input on taxation. Structuring something that is suitable to foreign investors. So I think that also needs to be addressed. And I think what I've seen is that the rules get. I'll give you an actual example. I was working with a fund accountant who is very good, but they took longer time than required to set up shop inside GIFT City, and so I have to change the fund accountant. Frankly, I think allow people to scale up first and then bring rules. So there is a lot that needs to happen if you really want this to thrive. Thanks.
It's a very important point, because I think every country worth its salt is setting up a international finance center. Saudi is doing it, Qatar has already done it, everybody is doing that. So you're absolutely right. We have to have the gumption and the wherewithal to stand on our own. So Pranav, just to pick up a cue from that, I think one of the key things which can come in is our products, different types of products. What are the next generation of products which you see coming in, the structure, the design, which can benefit Indian investors, but which are also sort of picked up from global references overseas? Because the more the products which come in here, then there's a question of demand and supply. The product will create its own supply, or rather its own demand.
Certainly.
What are the type of products you're talking about?
Absolutely. So quintessentially, GIFT City is right now focused on India-centric funds, right? Anybody who wants to come invest in India would come and set up shop in GIFT City, as against what you would see in a Dubai or a Singapore. Of course, there's a cost element, and if you would want to relatively come in at a cheaper cost for setup, that's when a lot of funds get attracted to GIFT City, which of course we understand is the base. You've got to do that to be able to create some mass before you start thinking beyond. So, I think we've done a great job till now as an IFC. Going forward, taking cues from what the other IFCs has done. For example, Dubai has a lot of open-ended evergreen structure. So anytime I talk to investors in Dubai, they would want to invest where there's liquidity, even in products such as alternatives, as a matter of fact. So those are structures which could really benefit GIFT City and investors from all over the world, including Indian investors looking at, investing in any of these products. There's US has a concept of BDCs, wherein you actually have AIFs listed on the stock market, which brings tremendous amount of liquidity. Again, it brings a lot of ease and confidence in fund managers. Only people who can scale up are actually setting up BDCs. You can actually look at something like a BDC in GIFT City and list it in the GIFT exchange. In the session before this, we were talking about blockchain remittances. Just makes things a lot more easier. Singapore's done sandbox in the past, where you would have a lot of nuanced new products. For example, there's a lot of talk about blended finance in the country currently. Europe's done a lot of green bonds which are ESG focused, and while of course coming from the AIF hat, we talk a lot about private credit, but there's something called sustainability linked loans. We can actually start sandboxes for something of that sort in GIFT City. There's a lot happening in the world which gives you that freedom to sort of innovate and experiment with products and see what really works with a lot of his families, especially when you're going into nuanced asset classes and something which is very illiquid, which is not so much experimented. And I feel there bringing in the flexibility in products will certainly go a long way for GIFT.
And just to circle back, you did talk about a lot of exciting new products, but one of the things I keep hearing is that there have been some exciting products which have already been launched, but there is no global allocation coming in. So where do you think is the gap? What could be the inflection point?
So I feel like a lot of LPs currently, a lot of pensioners especially, are sitting on the fence, especially when it comes to GIFT City. They want to see a little more involvement, which is understandable. They want to see proof of the pudding before they actually come in. On the other side, currently when we talk to our LPs, not one has showed concern with coming in through a GIFT structure. Not one has told us to set up in Singapore. So as a matter of fact, we have 6 registered AIFs, 2 more in the pipeline. 5 are inward looking, 1 is outward looking from GIFT, and all the ones that are inward looking, a lot of US, Canadian pensions are, sort of considering, and none of them have asked us to go. So I feel like we've come a long way. Of course, there are certain concerns with onboarding. We still have that thought process of you need a notarized document. We still want physical documents. So, there are certain aspects which need to be ironed out. But other than that, I feel like it's a great start. And the quantum growth from here would come from unique, innovative products and a little more, as Bhavin rightly said, thinking not inwards towards the regulator in India, but sort of putting yourself on the pedestal with the outside ones.
Very interesting. I think between Bhavin and you've willingly drawn out a little bit of a checklist for GIFT. You're peeling the onion and you're saying, okay, all of this is fine, but why don't you just look at this? So Vishnu, I'm going to come to you with the next question. We talked about hedge funds and long short funds being as essential risk mitigation tools. As GIFT scales up, okay, as these strategies scale up, and you've used a lot of global data, global references, you work globally as well. When will we start exporting these strategies? When do you think you're going to see an Indian fund manager, and if I can use the term, a brown fund manager, looking at different countries, managing countries, geographies, currencies? Do you think it will happen in the next 5 years? And what does GIFT need to do to make that possible?
So I think, again, to give the reference to your brown fund manager thing, I think...
That doesn't get picked up with a soundbite.
No. I'll tell you the live example. Back in my days in Wall Street, if I remember before the Lehman crash, in Lehman, out of the top 30 performing traders, the portfolio managers, PMs, almost 50% were Indians. So
it's already happening.
So it's globally. You go to Singapore, these IIT kids, these quants, you look at us, we've always been on the right side of the brain, right? So I don't think that's a question at all, that do we have a quality, can the brown fund manager globally do? I think the problem always been a platform. It's not been given to us. It's not an apple to apple comparison sitting in GIFT versus Singapore. So another interesting data is if you look at Asia's 25 largest hedge funds, 24 are set in Singapore and Hong Kong. There has to be reason, right? Only one is Japan. And that's because they do long short in Japanese banking. That's the only reason. That other than that, all 24 are only in 2 territories. The primary reason is the kind of ecosystem they've created, the repatriation laws, the capital gain structures. As a fund manager, you want that ease life, right? You don't, your quants can work. If I'm picking between GIFT and Singapore, I need a strong reason other than me being in India. I can be a biased fund manager always because I live in India and I'm an Indian citizen. But if the question is for the family office and create wealth, I don't think they care. I think they want to make money.
Very interesting. We have 2.5 minutes. The audience has a choice. I ask a rapid fire question, or would you like to ask some questions to the panelists? We can take 1 question each for the panelists. If you can ask it quickly and if the panelists can talk about it, or should I proceed? Should I hog the limelight or you? I carry on? Okay, nice. So, I didn't expect that. It's one of those weddings, yeah. So, rapid fire question. Don't think too much. Use muscle memory. Okay. I promise you, if it's controversial, we will blow it up. Okay. So, a rapid fire question. This question, all of you can answer this. One mistake families keep making in their investments.
Not hiring that wedding planner. They've got to do it.
Which is GIFT?
GIFT, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Set up family offices, yeah.
And full disclosure, she's not being paid to say this.
Not at all.
I'll say focus too much on fees, not on the talent they are hiring.
Oh, nice. Very nice. Vishnu?
I think again, long-term vision. The problem is everybody talks about long-term, but when it comes to not deliverable, as he said, also in his live example, 9 years it took in comparison. I mean, I've met family offices who say, I'm a long-term investor, and then I ask them how many times you see a portfolio. They say only twice in a day we refresh. So, I mean, I got the answer that when you say long-term and you refresh your money control twice in a day. So, I think that psychology needs to change.
So maybe I can ask you the next question. One action families need to take right away, apart from not seeing their portfolios twice a day. One action do you think they need to take?
The allocation. You have to create IPS, investment policy statement. It's like your board resolution. Stick to it. Don't change based on market sentiments. Don't change based on valuations. Create your IPS.
Prerna?
I'd say diversify, move beyond the traditional asset classes, look beyond. There's a lot happening. There's a lot of alpha there.
Bhavin?
I think, invest outside India.
Okay. One product or asset class in gift that excites you the most, Bhavin?
I mean, I'm conflicted because I definitely think that, if you look at my own portfolio, 35-40% is outside India and 60% is in India. And, so the opportunity to offer that service to investors excites me the most.
Wonderful. Vishnu?
I mean, it hasn't happened. I mean, one product, I'm also biased. I mean, I would say
Sure,
global long shot. I would love to see someone like Renaissance or Pershing Square coming to India and getting it listed, changing the landscape, because Jane Street has set up a really bad example in terms of probably some people call it manipulation, some people call it muscle power. But I would love to see actual global hedge fund coming to India and kind of changing the landscape of thought process.
Prerna?
My bias is all in all for AIFs. We've set up 6, we're seeing some brilliant traction, so I'd say AIFs.
As we end, I think I should also bring the wedding metaphor all over again. So every Indian family every family which is going in for a wedding looks forward to the Sangeet, and Sangeet is usually fun. You have those uncles and aunties, should I be saying that? The uncles and aunties doing missteps, the cousins doing perfectly in synchronization, and then kids falling off the stage. It's all chaos. But at the end of the day, there's a wedding planner which brings everything across, and you have a lot of nice memories going across. So I think when I hear your discussion today, I think this will now probably set off, a ripple in terms of people's minds that is there life beyond family investing, and why should we not look at GIFT City as a catalyst? So thank you so much for being such a wonderful panelist section. I was looking for the word, the matriarchs and the patriarchs and the mamas and the chachas. Thank you so much for being that, and thank you for being such a wonderful audience. It was great having you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.